Life imitate art. Does art imitate life? Take a look in the mirror to find the true answer. What do I know? How should I go? Themes and memes. What do they mean? Why are they here? From whence do they come?
You are listening to Themes and Memes, a different kind of movie review podcast. I am your host, Aaron Franz. My website is ageoftransitions.com. With me is my co-host, Adam of cerebralrevolt.com. How are you doing today, Adam?
Not so bad, Aaron. Yeah, not so bad. I'm looking forward to getting into discussion. I think, as we mentioned in our previous review, which was Rosemary's Baby, we said that we might look at doing, a number of films in sequence which deal with similar themes and memes. I think that's what we're going to be doing today with the film which we'll be reviewing on this installment, which is called The Brotherhood of The Bell. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with that film, but it's generally it's fairly well known in sort of conspiracy culture in general, would you say?
Yeah, I would say that. I've definitely seen this cited in different YouTube videos and things like that. It'll pop up because it's a film about secret societies, just generally speaking. And it's about a man who is a member of a secret society, a bit like Skull and Bones, because it's based out of university, a prominent university. And the guy, his problem throughout the film is trying to get out of the secret society. So that's what we're dealing with. And in that way, it's like Rosemary's Baby, because with Rosemary's Baby, it was a satanic cult that Rosemary, the main character, kind of finds herself thrown within. She's in the midst of it, gets caught up into it without ever knowing what's happening. She's getting carried away by it, but she's in there, she's trying to get out. So it's her trying to get out of a cult in that movie, and in the same way, this man's trying to escape his cult, his secret society. In this movie, they're both made around the same time period. So I would say to listeners to go back and listen to the Rosemary's Baby episode if you haven't listened to that yet, and you'll definitely notice similarities, and maybe we'll add on to the same ideas we were talking about last time here today.
I think so, because I think one of the main sort of concepts we hit upon in that particular review was that the fact that the actions and the power and the influence of secret societies becomes most apparent when someone basically disobeys them in terms of, breaking their oath of silence and the oath of allegiance and going against them. That's when the secret society becomes apparent as a secret society. That's when you begin to see who they are and what they are and how much power they have and what their sort of agendas are. And so, again, in this film, as you described, that's exactly what happens. We have a guy who gets involved and tries to get out, and through this process of trying to get out and trying to expose them and sort of fight back against them, their power, their influence, who they are, what they, how big they really are, all those types of things are really brought into the limelight. And so those concepts, I think, are the most interesting ones to discuss.
Yeah, and this is a good point that you're talking about here too, because you don't know about a secret society until you see for yourself the machinations of the secret society. And the main characters here are people that are initiates, whether knowing or unknowing. In the case of the Brotherhood of the Bell, this man's well knowing that he's been initiated into a secret society. With Rosemary, it was sort of a different process going on. But they were cult members themselves. And then the cult starts doing things which are not beneficial to them, so they have to get out, and things are so bad that the problem becomes, how do you let the world know about this secret organization, what they're doing, how what they're doing is not a good thing? How do you convince people without sounding crazy? And you get the whole aspect of the other cult members of secret society itself does everything it can to marginalize the person so that they can't bring out the message, and so right. Everything gets obscured.
That's right. Yeah, they close ranks, so to speak, and they do, as you say, everything they can to make sure that the individual themselves is undermined, is ridiculed by the public or the media if they choose to go and try and expose them through the media, and is generally made out to be a loony in every possible way, or is possibly even sectioned and put into some kind of institution or whatever it may be. Number of different methods that they use, but yeah, most definitely.
And then another point with this is that to the general public, secret societies they carry a mystique. So people understand that Freemasonry is a real thing and that there are real secret societies out there. However, they really know nothing about them, how they operate, like what they might be doing and things like that. So there's a mystique like, okay, I know of them, but I have no idea what they're doing. So that works in all different ways. If you go about trying to expose these said secret societies, it's very difficult to bring out hard proof. So the burden of proof is on the accuser, right? And in this case, in both these movies, the accuser is the main character. The main character is in a dangerous situation within the secret society. They want to get out. They want to tell the world. But the burden of proof is on them. They're going, okay, so now I have to prove to everybody. So it becomes a case of proving your case. And that's so things get foggy and misty and, mystical. The word mystical is, in one sense, it refers to mist, as in like fog, like liquid suspended in air. That's what fog is. So you got water and air elements. So then you get the whole occult side of, the four elements in with the mist. So in one sense, mystique, mystery, mysticism is about this sort of fogginess where nothing's quite clear. But you, as the initiate and things like that, that you're onto something. And if you're in the secret society, you literally know that you're doing something. But even you, as the initiate, things are always in that fog. The mist is always there. So you never really know yourself what you're even doing.
No, and that becomes very, very much apparent throughout this film. And the protagonist faces the same problem in very much the same way that Rosemary did, during her efforts to try and expose the group, where the actions that had been taken by the group against her, and the same goes for this film, put them into a state of mind where they were totally confused about what was going on and who they could trust and who was in on it and all those kinds of questions and what they should do about it. And most definitely the case. Of course, we also get back to the question of the burden of proof. You've got an individual who all they've really got is their own word. That's it, really. I mean, they don't generally have documentation or anything like that. I mean, at best, they might have somebody else's testimony, but for the most part, it's just them saying, trust me on this.
Exactly.
Whilst they're in a very, very confused state.
And they seem crazy.
State.
Yeah.
And they seem crazy because they as we said in Rosemary's video, they kind of are crazy because of the experiences that they've been put through.
Yeah, exactly. So the cult is working on that aspect and making them emotionally distressed so that they're emotionally ill, right?
Yeah.
So they're emotionally unstable, and there's nothing they can really do about that. That's just a natural reaction.
Of course not, no.
But they can appear to be insane to the person who is being trying to be convinced by this person. They're going about to prove the case, but they appear crazy. And I think this is the reason why in alternative media you see this film referenced so much, because this is the process of, waking up and you're trying to tell the world about it. You're put in the situation where you're trying to explain these things where they're true, but you yourself haven't quite nailed them down. They're true, you haven't nailed them down, but you
don't quite have all the proof.
Yeah. So wouldn't you agree that's the situation you're in here?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, both of these films, the experiences that the protagonists go through in both of these films very much reflect the way that people deal with and experience the process of what we generally refer to as waking up. Going through that sort of the fogginess, the crazed kind of state where you're very much sure that something is up, that something is going on, but you're not quite sure what it is. You've got a general idea, and that you're very, very passionate about exposing that idea and promoting it and advancing it and trying to make sure that other people understand that it exists and whatnot. But at the same time, because of the lack of proof, or the lack of at least solid proof, and the fact that you're in a confused state of mind just leads you to come across like a lunatic to most people. And so I think this is done very, very deliberately, both in terms of people who are trying to escape secret societies or are in secret societies in the first place, and those who are trying, break out of the mainstream consensus trance as well into some sort of awakened state in terms of, learning about what's really going on in the world. Definite parallels there, I think. Yeah.
Well, what people don't realize about secret societies is that one of their main goals, all secret societies, is the understanding of the human being in its entirety, and psychology. Human psychology is probably number one. The human mind, how the human mind works, understanding that so that one can actually gain control of it. Typically for yourself, the initiate is supposed to understand all aspects of themselves, look at themselves, be able to self-analyze their own behavior so that they can go about changing that behavior in an intelligent way and changing themselves. It's like self-help. I've said this before, that secret societies and alchemy is like the original self-help. You know what I mean? Where you go about changing yourself for the better. So it makes sense that if a secret society itself is compromised as a whole by one member, then they can know how to exploit different aspects of human psychology of that member to divert them to get rid of the problem, which is one person. And one person isn't a whole lot. You know what I mean? So it's not that difficult to take advantage of the weaknesses in human psychology in one person, especially if a group is harassing one person. It's not difficult to do.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, just the emotional stress of, being alienated in that way, of knowing something, of wanting to get that information out there, of wanting to convince other people, but, having the majority against you. I mean, that fact alone, or that situation alone, rather, is enough to put so much emotional stress on somebody that they do kind of temporarily go crazy for a little while if they haven't already gotten to that point, So definitely a technique and a tactic that is, used, as I said before, both by secret societies and, I guess, society in general in many ways, to try and, I don't know, ridicule and undermine anybody who would sort of...
Who comes up causing problems.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. But I suppose it might be good to give a brief outline of some of the sort of the key plot sequences in the film, so people,
definitely. We should definitely note how the film begins. How does this film start out?
Yeah, the film starts out. That's probably the way the film starts out is very, very interesting and significant, because what happens is that, as you said before, a guy who had previously become initiated into this the secret society called Brotherhood of the Bell is called upon to come and perform another initiation ritual, whereby they would initiate a junior, the next person to become initiated into the Brotherhood. So it's a sunrise initiation. He flies down to St. George's College, and they go into the the Brotherhood of the Bell's fraternity room, and there's a big sort of rose compass portrait on the floor and a big bell hanging over it, and they they speak to the young, the senior, the initiate, the neophyte, about basically what this means, and do you accept the terms and conditions of being a member, and blah blah blah, and all that kind of stuff, and all the members who have been called into the initiation, stand on this. On this rose compass on the inside the fraternal section of the college, and you've got a big bell with a boom, hanging over it, and as I said, as I was saying,
they're at the
initiate,
four corners,
the four corners. The initiate stands at the east. His senior, which is the protagonist, stands at the west, opposite him, and then you've got the next guy up, the next one senior, standing at the north, and then the next one up standing at the south. Anyway, so they all stand at these four corners. Then they ring the bell 5 times because it's 5 o'clock. Sunrise, dawn.
5 o'clock in the morning. It's a sunrise.
Of course, the sunrise. Sun comes up in the east, etc. That kind of thing.
As does the initiate. He's rising to his new life in the society.
All that stuff. And so they each take a turn at ringing the bell. So the 4 men, each one rings the bell once and then walks off. And then the last person to ring the bell rings it once, and leaves the boom swinging. So when he walks off, the bell rings a 5th time. So what we've got is 4 guys with 5 rings of the bell. And I thought there's something kind of significant there in terms of the bell ringing 5 times, because 5 is a very interesting number in the occult, and it also sort of speaks to the concept of the 5th man, which is something that we see in sort of in real cases and in fictional cases of whenever there's some kind of conspiracy going on. You might have 4 guys who are basically doing whatever they're doing.
They have their roles.
We have the roles, with a 5th man in the background.
He's hidden.
The controller.
He's hidden,
he's
the leader.
He's the leader, but he's hidden. And so he's always referred to as the 5th man. And we saw this in the 1960s Phil B. Burgess McLean defection case, where those MI5 agents defected to the Soviet Union and sort of compromised MI5 supposedly. There was a big issue over who the 5th man was, because they knew there were 5 guys, they didn't know who it was. Some people say it was Victor Rothschild, but anyway, there's the whole concept of the 5th man. And so I think perhaps that 5th ring of the bell could have been a sort of a nod to the fact of there being a secret, unseen force or person who was overseeing.
Unseen one,
a 5th unseen one in that scenario, in the concept or in the context of a secret society. I think that's possibly one of the things they might have been trying to emphasize there, or just the fact of the other interpretations of or meanings of number 5.
5 being kind of connoting man's control over the physical world.
The earthly elements, the earthly world, the earthly realm, and control over that, Because
again, back to the earth elements, there's 4 of them. And then the 5th element is that of spirit, right? And that comes about through the life of man, actually. He's the 5th one. And the human hand is used to symbolize human control over nature, because that's what you manipulate the earth with, right? That in your mind. But your physical tools are your hands. And the most important finger on the hand is the thumb. And when you're talking about the 5th unseen member, they're referred to as the thumb, symbolically. And this grouping of 5 people secret society grouping of 5 people is very popular within revolutionary movements. You see this all throughout. France is popular in Russia as well. In Russian Revolution, French Revolution, they use these groups of 5 quite a bit. So it's a revolutionary thing. It's about control of the world. You have the 5 a.m. initiation ceremony. So the bell actually, the clock bell at the beginning of the movie rings 5 times. So you get that 5 ringing of the bell, and then their initiation, they ring it 5 times too. They actually ring it 4 times, but there's the 5th ring as we're talking about, so it actually does do 5. Then there's more ringing of bells later in the movie too.
A lot of bells in this film. So we can get into that later on. But so I mean, that's basically the opening scene of the film, is initiation ritual of the Brotherhood of the Bell. So we've got the protagonist being called in to serve his role, as the senior of the new young recruit, the new neophyte or initiate, whatever you want to call him, And so, on his way home from this initiation session, he's called upon by a senior member to go and to drop by a house and pick up a set of instructions. So he does so, and goes and visits this guy, and basically this set of instructions is, well, you've been a member of this fraternal order for some time now. You've benefited greatly from being a member, and now we're calling upon you to pay your dues, to pay your bill, to do something for us.
Yeah.
And what that duty or that bill is basically for him to go and make sure that one of his academic colleagues, because he's an economics professor at an esteemed university in Los Angeles, his duty is to make sure that this academic colleague of his remains at the college rather than taking up a post at another college as he had planned to do so. He'd applied for a post at another college. He definitely wanted to do it. He was happy about moving away and taking up this new post. But apparently the Brotherhood of the Bell wanted one of their own members to take up that role, and in order to do so, they needed to make sure that this guy did not get it. So, the protagonist's role was to make sure that this guy didn't get it. It was basically going to talk him out of it, and they gave him documentation, basically to bribe him with, because he was a defector from the Soviet Union. They had some documentation on how his defection came about and who helped him, and basically Patterson goes and shows this to him and says, right, he tries, soft tactics first, tries to talk him out of it, but it ends up showing him the document. It doesn't work. Yeah, he shows him the documentation, and basically this guy freaks out and just feels like, God, I've got nowhere left to run. I can't go anywhere. Life's over for me. I've got no options left. And he apparently appears to commit suicide. So the next morning, the protagonist, Mr. Patterson, gets word of this, and this makes him feel obviously very, very guilty, because he was friends with the man, and he feels very outraged that the Brotherhood have asked him to do this, and he feels actually directly responsible for the man's death. Yeah. And so that's where I guess the main kind of plot of the film really picks up from, doesn't it?
Yeah. You've got this main character being this more senior member of the Brotherhood of the Bell. He's been in it for quite a few years. He was supposed to be the guy watching over the new initiate from the initiation in the morning. We sort of just get away from the new initiate, and we follow this more senior guy, Patterson, and his trials and tribulations trying to escape from the secret society for one thing, but he's trying to expose it more than anything else, because he did something wrong and he feels terrible about it. So now he wants to right the wrong and say, hey, look, I'm guilty of this, but the secret society at large is guilty of coercing me to do this. So something has to be done about stopping them and stopping this process from continuing.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got a similar situation in many ways, I think, to the situation we outlined with Rosemary's Baby, whereby, she wasn't really aware of what was really going on until very, very late in the film. And this is actually kind of played out in Brotherhood of the Bell as well, because although the main protagonist does know that he is a member and is, up until the beginning of the film, a proud member, a happy member, whatever, he makes a comment to the guy who was just initiated, when they sort of leave the fraternal house, basically saying, the guy says to him something like, so I guess now that I've been initiated, I'm part of the establishment. And this protagonist, Mr. Patterson, brags to him and says, no, you're not part of the establishment, you are the establishment. And so it's quite funny that he says that at the beginning of the film, sort of bragging about how much power and influence he has and how he's really part of the elite of America now, when as we discover, he has really no idea what he's been involved in all these years, because once he actually gets exposed to what this secret society is all about, and once he gets called upon to actually do something, the kind of things that they actually do, and becomes, involved with their processes and their agendas in some way, he has no idea that this has been going on all this time. So it's kind of similar to Rosemary's Baby in that respect as well.
Yeah, he makes that comment about being the establishment, but then he doesn't make for whatever reason, he doesn't realize that going to the establishment for help won't work, because that's what he continually tries to do over and over again. He goes to the establishment to right the wrong, the authorities, when the authorities are just, they're the establishment, so they're the Brotherhood themselves. So that's a problem for him. He doesn't know any other way, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I think it just speaks to the arrogance of someone who's in a secret society, who's probably been kept at a lower order of some description, who's had their access to knowledge compartmentalized and very much controlled in a lot of ways, and who sort of arrogantly thinks that because they're in a secret society, they know all there is to know, and they've got all the right connections. They know exactly how everything works, and they know all the rites and the rituals and the history, and they know everything there is to know, as I said. But then, in truth, they find out that they really didn't know anything at all.
Yeah. That they themselves were useful in some way to the society at large to fulfill some sort of task, and that's really each man's goal. And I guess through vanity, it's hard to realize that that's the case a lot of times. So you want to think more of yourself, I guess, in one respect, is what's going on. I don't know.
Yeah, I think what they do a lot of the time in order to keep people sort of, I guess, happy and sort of satisfied and content in their roles as secret society members is placating and appeasing the ego and definitely playing to it and making people feel as though they are very much part of the establishment, that they are elite in some way. So I think this was definitely used on Mr. Patterson. Especially, when we see the statements that he makes at the beginning of the film, like, we are the establishment, when, in fact, as I said before, he has absolutely no idea what that actually means at all. And, we see this in his actions that he takes in order to try and expose the secret society. So, I guess that's sort of the next phase of the film, really, is him feeling guilt over the fact that he has, indirectly caused the death of one of his academic colleagues, then deciding that he is going to try and reach out to somebody, get some help, and go and do something about this. So what he does is he goes to see he tells his wife, first of all, and his wife takes it pretty well, and she suggests speaking to her father, because he's, quite a powerful person, apparently, influential, etc. And he goes and speaks to her father, and her father says, well, don't call the police, they're useless, they won't be able to do anything about the situation. What you need to do is go to the federal government. You need to go to some kind of, like an FBI office or something like that. So he takes him to an FBI office, and it's this kind of just an empty office, isn't it? There's nothing in it.
Yeah, and they say, the agent there says it's for a reason that's empty, because it's a cover office. The agent is the friend of the father-in-law, so it's like, here, he'll take care of it, and talk to this guy.
Yeah. Don't speak to the police, and don't bother calling the actual FBI or anything. Just come into this empty office and speak to this guy who has absolutely no badge, no credentials, no paperwork, no nothing at all, and just tell him everything you know. And so,
that's what happens.
Yeah, that's exactly what happens. Yeah. So Patterson goes and does that, and, finds out that, nothing becomes of it. And he eventually goes back to the real FBI, who are in the same building, and says to them, I came here the other day and spoke to one of your special agents and you're one of your cover officers, and told them about this problem I've got with the secret society and what they're doing. And they basically say, I'm sorry, we have no record of this. And so what they do is the agent calls his father-in-law and says, well, I've got your son-in-law here, and he says that, you guys both came in together the other day to, report some kind of conspiracy. And I just need to have that verified, because we've got no records of that. And the father-in-law, all of a sudden, we don't see this until, later on in the film, but what the father-in-law actually says to him on the phone is, oh no, the man's just psychologically distressed because one of his academic colleagues has gone and committed suicide, and he's got all these crazy conspiracy theories in his head, and his memory's playing tricks with him. And so, Patterson obviously, realizes that, the father-in-law can't be trusted. And he drives over there and has a big shouting match at him and says, you're one of them, aren't you? Blah, blah, blah. You lied on the phone. And he said, what are you talking about? The father-in-law starts playing mind games with him and tries to confuse him. He says, I think you might be going crazy here. We never actually went to the FBI. There was no cover office. Me and you never did this, Yeah.
So would that be gaslighting? Am I right? Is that what he's doing to him?
gaslighting. He's changing his own sense of reality. He's manipulating it to control him. And to make him think that he's crazy, so that he can be manipulated. Yeah.
Yeah. So that technique is being used here. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely. And not just that, the fact that it's not just his father-in-law that's sitting there, but he's actually got a psychiatrist in the room. He's hired a psychiatrist, and in anticipation of this confrontation.
That's right. He's hanging out with the psychiatrist already in the room. He's like, "Oh, this is my friend." And Patterson comes in like, "I'm not crazy. Don't even talk to me." So it becomes this big confrontational thing in one aspect too.
Yeah, exactly. All of a sudden, it's oh no. For one moment he's his father-in-law is trying to help him out and take him to the FBI, and I know people in the FBI and they'll help you out. And the next minute he's saying, "Oh no, that never happened. It's all in your head. It's completely imaginary, and I think you're going a bit crazy. And it just so happens that I've got one of my psychiatrist friends on hand here, sitting next to me on the couch, who can help you with your psychological problems." And
this is exactly what we were talking about before, where they're taking advantage of your emotionally distressed state in order to break you down so that you are ineffectual in your quest to expose the hidden group, and all its machinations, all the things it does. You're going to be ineffectual because you're actually going to be not crazy, but just emotionally distressed, and then people are going to note that. And they're not going to listen to you for one thing, but it's easy to throw accusations your way too.
Yeah. I mean, we see this, being played out very much so, sort of towards the middle and towards the end of the film, where basically the film just follows Mr. Patterson's efforts to try and expose the Brotherhood, him going on like local regional radio or TV shows, daytime TV, that kind of thing, and doing sort of little media conferences or whatever, that sort of thing, and he's not getting anywhere with it. And
there's a segment where he's going all throughout the media because, again, he thinks that's the establishment. It's never really said explicitly, but it is. But they show you that it is, in that not only is he interviewed, but other members of the Bell are interviewed. They're like, "Hey, he alleges that you're a member of the Bell," and then they go, "Oh, well, it's such a secret. I didn't even know I was a member." So,
what does that remind you of?
Yeah, exactly.
What does that remind you of? I mean, exactly. I mean, this is like this is the script that is used by pretty much every secret society member that we've ever sort of seen, interviewed or questioned on these types of issues in the media. I mean, think back to George Bush Jr. Being asked on live television about his membership of Skull and Bones, and he just sort of made some very joking reference to it, like, oh yes, that was a bit of fun back when I was at college, and the interviewer says, "Oh well, it's being accused of being a very, very powerful and dark secret society," and George Bush is like, "Oh well, it's so secret I didn't even know that was the case then." Ha 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 ha. And, same thing with Obama when they asked him about his membership of the Council on Foreign Relations. He just made it into a big joke, and everybody laughs, and it's comedic relief. And so the issue's kind of resolved, and they move on, and, it takes attention away from the actual, the issue at hand,
Secret society members are referred to as knights. They refer to themselves as knights. And a knight has a sword, and they also have a shield. And a shield is a way to deflect any attacks toward you. And so the shield that's used in these instances is making a joke, and you divert attention away with your shield. So the knight is, in this aspect, using their shield to deflect attention away from yourself, because you can actually hide behind your shield too. I mean,
well, yeah.
You're obscured from any attack when you're behind the shield, so they don't see you. So I don't know. It's just a little symbolic thing that I thought of right now.
Well, if you look at all the I can't remember which seal it is, but one of the seals of the United States government, I think the White House or one of the government agencies in the U.S., the seal is a bird with two heads, a Masonic bird with two heads with a shield over it, so you've got the left wing, the right wing, as in the both sides of the political spectrum. but both being part of the same bird. So what you're really looking at is one entity, but just two sides of it. But that fact is obscured by the fact that you've got a shield covering it. So this stuff comes up again, very blatantly in everyday life.
Yeah.
It's not so obscure concept. I mean, you can see it in the imagery that these organizations have chosen to put up as their official seals and banners.
Yeah, and when it comes to swords and shields, they're not literal physical implements most of the time. A lot of times they're actually psychological tactics. A sword, you can use a psychological tactic as a weapon. You can use a psychological tactic as a defense tool.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's what's being done. And again, it's about understanding of psychology, understanding of human nature in order to, in one sense, get your way. The ideal is that your society is doing good and that you're supposed to be like bringing about a better civilization for everybody. So that's the ideal they're working with. But the method by which they achieve that goal is the complete understanding of the human being. And again, it's in order to better it. That's the idea, but I don't know.
At least on paper, anyway.
Yeah. That's how it is on paper. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But we see, these, I suppose, what you might call defense mechanisms, and I don't know I suppose they might even be, under the banner of maybe counterintelligence type tactics and that type of thing. Ways of deflecting attention, ways of confusing people, ways of undermining people on a public stage, and we see this brought out very, very strongly. Where Patterson reaches the point where he's done all, he's made all these attempts to try and expose the Brotherhood, through the media, and they've responded by interviewing other members who just laugh it off and brush it off, and make him out to be an idiot, and he eventually gets a slot on a kind of a larger, sort of maybe more popular daytime. I'm not sure if it's a daytime show.
It seems the format is a daytime talk show, much like Jerry Springer, something like that.
Yeah. Something along those lines, like the 1970 equivalent of what that would have been back then, that kind of thing. And so he goes on the show, and the host kind of presses him, and for details and all this kind of stuff. And there's a bit of conflict back and forth. And then what they do, and this is again referencing the whole concept of defense against people who would wish to expose you, and the various psychological tactics which are used. What they do is they bring on people to begin to ask questions.
First of all, Patterson gives his case in a calm, cool, collected way, and the audience is like, "Oh, okay, that's a good case." And then it starts to happen. That's right. Yeah, he does make a sort of a fairly erudite case, which you come across as fairly eloquent, fairly sane. Think that what he's saying sounds fairly plausible, and so they realize, that this is now the point where we've got to do something about this, because we've got to take some kind of damage control here. Well, no, they actually let him tell his case, because that's all part of the tactics that they employ on him later. So what they do is they let him say his case, and then they bring their people in to confound the situation, is really what happens.
Actually, you're right. Oh, you're completely right about that. Yeah, in fact, I definitely agree. Yeah, I take back what I said. Yeah, that's, I think, definitely the case. But what they do, and what we're talking about here, is he puts his case forward, in the way that we've outlined, and but then what they do is they start bringing on members of the, because they've got a live, television audience. They bring on people.
The audience are brought forward.
Are brought forward to the podium to ask him questions, and speak to him, and so what have you got? You've got like a Black Panther guy comes on first.
Yeah, basically a Black Panther, yes.
Someone like of that type of creed or whatever, and then you've got who is it? Like an anti-Semite. I mean,
an anti-Semite saying everything is controlled by the Jews. It's a Jewish conspiracy. Here, get a hold of us at this address, and we'll tell you the truth. Blah 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 blah.
And then you've got somebody else, I can't remember, but what you're basically seeing is the fact that he's gone and put a fairly good case forward, or they've allowed him to do so, at least anyway. And then what they've done is they've allowed all these so-called random members of the audience who are obviously plants, obviously.
And again, you have to discern that for yourself as the viewer of this film. They never come out and explicitly say that, but it's quite obvious that that's the case.
Yeah, because it works so effectively.
Mm-hmm.
Because he is initially seen to be fairly sort of sane and fairly eloquent, whereas
the audience
when they bring
them.
the audience is kind of with them, and so
but then
whereas
the
when
extremists come out and it's like, oh wait a minute, they agree with him. They're like, yeah, this man's right, but he forgot to mention these extreme parts of the stories that I'm going to add on right now.
They throw in the extremism. Yeah, exactly. So they first agree with him, and then they bring on all the crazy stuff. They sort of agree with basically what 90% of what he's saying, but then they throw in all the crazy stuff, and everyone just erupts in laughter, and I think it ends up being a bit of a scuffle on stage or something like that, basically,
it actually gets in a fight like Jerry Springer. What's funny too is that the host gets in on it. He's the third member of the audience, sort of, in that he starts agreeing with the story too. He's like, oh yeah, he's right, but it's not a Jewish conspiracy or whatever. It's actually the Catholics that are in charge. And then he starts going on a Catholic tirade, only to then interrupt himself and say, do you see how stupid this sounds? Like, this is ridiculous. Yeah. This is what all these people who say these things believe. They're all extremists.
Exactly.
And then it breaks out into the fight, and it's just mayhem, and, nothing gets done.
Exactly, yeah. He comes on. He's allowed to make a case, and then they just turn it completely upside down on him. They turn it into a complete mess and make him, by association with all the craziness that's going on, look crazy by association. He's just another one of these people that believe that it's like the equivalent of what we've got today with the disinformation that's put out there in terms of that's all attached to all the truth movement stuff, like with, the best example I could give would probably be like David Icke, who comes out with, say, 80% information that is, fairly good, fairly well researched, fairly factual, but then throws in all the stuff about shape-shifting lizards and reptiles and aliens and all that kind of stuff.
Off, yeah.
And it just throws it completely off. Everyone just goes, oh, whatever, crazy, ridiculous, Looney Tune, forget about it, and they throw the baby out with the bathwater. And so that's exactly what's done here. Yeah. And for that reason, I find it very, very interesting, because it was almost like a template. You're almost being told in this film, if you're watching closely and if you're watching critically, about how these situations are dealt with and how these types of subjects are dealt with.
Yeah.
That's what we've seen since then, not only in that particular scene when they're on TV, but also how the other members actually deal with, media criticism over their membership, and sort of just laughing it off and using the shield tactic, as you described, to kind of just divert attention, and then use comedy or whatever other means to just, completely shift attention away from it, and so people forget and move on, and then nothing ever becomes of it.
And the psychology of the audience is important to know too. So the audience was listening to Patterson's story, and they were agreeing with it. They were like, oh yeah, this guy's got a good point. And what he's saying, we need to investigate what the charges this man is bringing up. So they're with him at first. But then when the extremists are brought on, you got to think of the state that you as an audience member might be in. You're like, oh, wait a minute, I was just agreeing with this guy, and now these crazy people are agreeing with him.
Whoops.
That means that if I agree with this guy, I'm also crazy. And that's what happens in people's minds.
That's crowd psychology for the most part. Everyone wants to be part of the group. Everyone wants to identify with the group. Everyone loves consensus. Everyone wants to agree with everybody. Everyone wants to feel as if, they're part of something, and that we're all in it together, and people want to feel that sense of camaraderie and that sense of consensus.
It's also very easy to scare people into going, oops, I was wrong. What was I thinking? And therefore, they don't want that to happen again. So when they hear a similar story down the road, they'll remember what happened to them before, and they were embarrassed before. People hate being embarrassed. They want to avoid the embarrassment that they had to go through themselves. Even when you can elucidate embarrassment even when you are not really present in any sort of group, except you're just watching a TV screen. You yourself, they can actually make you feel embarrassed without even being in a crowd, or guilty. Yeah,
it's
amazing,
absolutely.
Really, when you think about it.
It is quite amazing, yeah. And again, as I said before, I mean, we see this in the film, and we also see this, throughout history. I think pretty much since that film, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this film was in 1970, and so this is very well. This is still in the wake of the Kennedy assassination and all the criticism of the Warren Report. And I mean, I've gone into that before about how the CIA sent down that memo to all their assets and basically gave a formula or an outline or a script, a whole bunch of tactics, basically, in terms of how to ridicule and undermine people who talk about conspiracies,
Yeah.
And so as all this film was very much about, I think, what was going on socio-politically in America and the Western world at the time, and almost give a format for how these types of subjects would be dealt with in future, because that's exactly what we've seen since then. That's exactly the way that people, especially secret society members and politicians and bureaucrats and whoever, will deal with this type of criticism. And it's also the exact same way that people who are maybe whistleblowers or, people who are trying to get the truth out on something are also undermined in the exact same way. So I found it very interesting. It's because it almost seems to be like a format of some sort, or maybe some sort of form of predictive programming,
It is. It's fascinating. And I think for all these reasons are why this film has been cited in the alternative media so much, because it's so familiar, all this stuff, to people who are in the alternative and who have gone through waking up processes and all these related things of trying to get the truth out to people, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, anybody who has done any sort of that at all can relate to all these situations. They know that this stuff is real, that this process, this psychological process, is a real thing because they've experienced it for themselves.
That's right.
But then it really does become a whole different thing when you go about trying to explain that process and trying to prove that it's there, because, again, we're in the realm of mysticism. Everything is a mystery. It's a mystery how the human mind works and how human psychology works. Like, people don't understand themselves, do they? Right?
Yeah, not about anybody else. Yeah,
we're a mystery to ourselves. And that's one of the reasons that there's so much depression, and people are on so many are being prescribed drugs and perfectly fine in taking them because they're trying to get to the bottom of the mystery, and they're getting frustrated in doing so, and they're given all these false avenues to go down to try to solve the mystery, but it's not working.
No. And I think one of the other sort of parallels that we see between this film and contemporary culture and people trying to break out of their understanding of the system and trying to come to new levels of awareness about what's really going on is basically the concept of closing ranks, which is another tactic I think that's worth mentioning in this context, because it relates to sort of in many ways what you were describing before, because what you see in the film is when it becomes very apparent that Mr. Patterson has decided to basically expose them, to go against them, to make every effort to bring them down in some way, and goes on all his media shows and whatnot. He also approaches his senior and says expresses his dissatisfaction and all the rest of it. From that point onwards, it's like everywhere he turns, people just basically turn their backs on him. All of a sudden he finds out his post at the university has been suspended or something like that. Like he's basically lost his job, and then he tries to go to his father, who's also a sort of a fairly wealthy industrialist, and tries to get him for help. And then as soon as he does that, it's like they find out his father gets investigated. All of a sudden his father's under investigation by the IRS for like tax fraud. That's and right. He's losing all his money.
His father is with him in the case, but then he gets marginalized and taken out, more or less. Yeah.
And so you see the whole concept of the moment he chooses to sort of step over that fence, and to try and to separate himself from that group and to try and find truth, to try and expose truth, to try and walk the path of morality, to try and walk the true path of the seeker, or whatever you want to call it. He basically he finds that all those around him close ranks. And we see the same thing with people who are trying to, go through the waking up process. We'll often see that, once people start to express views of, dissatisfaction of the system and sort of countercultural ideas and anti-government rhetoric and all that kind of stuff, you'll find that, a lot of people will literally just kind of turn their backs on you, and just, they're like, okay, this person's crazy. Like, I don't want to see them. I don't want to talk to them. They've gone off the rails, whatever, and so it's a kind of a similar process there, I think.
Well, we've all been trained to do that to each other to an extent.
Yeah.
And when it comes to secret society, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They make a point to say that the secret society gave him everything in life, but then when he goes against them, they just take it all away at once. And then once you don't have anything and, you're not established as, maybe you're not a professor anymore, perhaps you're made to be homeless, you don't have a job, that can be done pretty quickly. And if it does, nobody will take you seriously because all of a sudden you're a nobody. I mean, that's in society at large, that's how most people view themselves and each other. We look at each other like, well, who are you? Oh, you work 9 to 5 doing this, so that's who you are. Therefore, I will listen to you within that frame of reference. You are a medical doctor that works in a hospital, so you know what I mean.
I can cite a perfect example of this, and in fact, I can't cite the exact example, so we'll have to put it up in the links for the show, because I haven't got it on me right now. But there was a kind of a little social experiment that was done some time ago, where they got some guy dressed up as like a tramp, with really sort of like dirty, falling apart clothes and like messy hair and unshaven and stinky and, like looking, typically homeless, and that they got him to, I think, go and stand on a soapbox in London or something like that and start preaching about, whatever it was. I can't remember what the subject was. And obviously everyone just thought, crazy old guy, whatever, and nobody listened to him. Not one person, stopped and listened to what he was saying. And then what they showed was that if they took that same guy, cut his hair, shaved him, put him in a nice brand new suit, put a few promo ads in the paper, put an ad or two on television, put him on a stage, and it comes out, says exactly the same thing, and just gets like raucous applause.
Right?
Like the whole audience is cheering, and like he's the new star. You know what I mean? Like he's a messiah.
Now I know what's wrong with me. I've always been listening to the crazy people on the street. I'm genuinely interested in what they have to say, and that's one of my problems in life.
No, me too. Yeah, I know. Yeah,
I've always loved it. I'm like, man, this is good stuff. You don't get this.
The insights you'll get from a tramp will be far more valuable than the insights you'll get from the average, banker or the average, whatever. I mean, maybe not a banker may have some interesting insights, but I mean.
If you can get
the average office worker, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
You get far more interesting insights from somebody who's been living on the streets all their life than somebody who's just been living a regular middle-class lifestyle, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
But maybe let's talk about how this film winds up. Where does Patterson end up? What happens in the end? Like, where they take the main theme of this film, too, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I guess to summarize, they really leave the film with a big question mark hanging over it. And I'm kind of a fan of those types of films, so I guess I'm a little biased in this scenario because I do enjoy films that leave you hanging. Well, not leave you hanging, but which do not give you a definitive answer as to what happened, which basically end where you're not sure. Things could have gone either way. Someone could have survived, they could have died. They could have married, they could have divorced. It's not explained. I kind of like those films, and this is kind of similar to what happens in this film. It's because what happens is, as I described before, Patterson goes to his father to get on side. He basically tries to explain to his father that the Bell has been in control of our whole lives. My wife was provided to me. Your business was given to you. All your contacts were given to you. My tenure at the university was given to me. Everything was given to us. And his father goes into a rage, tries to fight back. And obviously they come down on him. And his father ends up getting into a scuffle. And I think something happens with him. He might have been poisoned or something because he ends up in a coma and he ends up dying. And so Patterson ends up all on his own. And he's approached by one of his old university colleagues towards the end of the film, and who says to him, look, the only way you're ever going to get through this and get the story out there and make sure that you continue this fight and that something really becomes of it, is that if you get another member of the Brother to come out with you, to come and speak out with you, to go to some major media platform with the two of you telling you the exact same story. And so what he does is he goes back to St. George's College, and he finds the new initiate, which we described at the beginning of the film. The guy was his junior,
or whatever.
So he finds him and basically gives him the big speech about do you realize what you've just signed up for here? This is really serious. This organization is in control of our entire country. The president's a member. Because he's found out this through the course of the film, etc. And they'll give you all these things, but then the penance they'll ask you to pay might be something like your own life or your own family member's life, or they might ask you to completely destroy somebody else's life or to do some immensely horrific, horrible act. And so he basically sort of pitches this concept to him of like, look, let's run off together. Let's try and solve this thing together. Let's break ranks together. Let's team up and try and do something. And so, it gives this very impassioned speech to the young recruit. The young recruit sort of stands there looking speechless for a moment. Patterson heads off to the airport. And then the young recruit runs up behind him, obviously having changed his mind, and says, right, let's do this. And so the final shot is them kind of getting on a plane, presumably to, LA or New York or some big city to go on to presumably go and try and get a spot on some media show and come out and expose the order together. And that's basically where the film ends, is that sort of these two characters sort of riding off together into the sunset in the hopes of exposing the secret society. And again, as I said, we don't know what happens. We don't know whether they had any success or what happens from that point onwards, but it's almost suggested that might be the solution in such a situation.
Yes.
When I don't think that would be very accurate, because from what's happened so far, I don't think another person's going to make any difference.
And it's just more of the same. They're going to the established media.
Established media.
It's just the same old. He's going at the same format he's been using to no avail, and hoping that'll work. So in that sense, I don't like the ending and where they're kind of taking it there at the end. I don't know if that was done purposely, like to get people to think like, well, if you're ever in a similar situation or whatever, just do this or what. But the ending I wasn't crazy about because of that, for sure.
I totally agree. I mean, well, as I said, I'm kind of biased towards those types of endings, but in this particular film, it definitely, left a huge question mark there as to what was, what actually happened and what they were actually trying to get across in terms of their, the ideology behind trying to expose, these types of orders and that kind of thing, and whistleblowing.
Yeah.
So,
but
left with a clear picture.
All in all, this is a very interesting film. I know that you said it was a made-for-TV film, which I didn't realize till you told me that. Interesting time period, 2 years after Rosemary's Baby. Same sort of ideas being presented. May have been inspired by Rosemary's Baby and the success of that movie, very likely. All that.
Yeah, there's I think, I'm not sure so much about the 60s, but I know definitely in the 70s we saw a whole slew of conspiracy films. They were very, very, very popular in the 70s. I think primarily in things like the wake of the Warren Commission and all the suspicion of Kennedy and stuff like that. I think that really kicked those off.
There was the occult explosion too, and people
of
all
course.
interested in the occult. I think that was the 60s. I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, of course, we had the whole Laurel Canyon thing beginning to blossom in the sort of mid to late 60s, and then we had in the early 70s, you had all of the bands like Led Zeppelin and a few others, and the Grateful Dead getting into Crowleyism and black magic and all that kind of stuff, and occultism of various forms, and so all that stuff was going on at that period of time, and so this film was part of many films from the late 60s to, I'd say, probably the late 70s that dealt with big sort of, national conspiracies involving, whole governments plotting to do,
prominent secret societies and from prominent institutions like academic institutions, just like Skull and Bones, university-based secret society. Very interesting film. Again, it's cited in alt media for good reason. I think the most interesting aspect here is the psychological manipulation aspect. How there are certain processes like gaslighting techniques like that are used, that can be used, and they are used because all the all the fictional scenarios in this film we've seen play out in real media. We've seen these techniques actually used. For those who have been paying attention have clearly seen these throughout the years.
That's right. I think, something that's also probably important to mention is, I think, in essence, and I think you'd probably agree with me on this, Aaron, is what we're really talking about here at its core is Masonry. Mm-hmm. I think this film is kind of an allegory for the Masonic system and of Masonic traditions, of Masonic, law, of Masonic machinations. And I think that although they chose to, use a different name and to use different traditions,
a more specific society,
more specific,
in this case.
Yeah. But it's like, I've sort of talked about this before, and how Masonry is kind of like the umbrella for so many other secret societies, and it's kind of like the root from which all these other secret societies branch off from, and so they all have a very they'll all have that in common. They all have very, very common traditions, but they sort of vary according to the sect that you're in. But this kind of appears to be a sect of Freemasonry, and I think is supposed to represent the Masonic structure in general. I think this was kind of an allegory for Freemasonry and how Freemasonry works in general. I think this film was very much meant to be that way.
Yeah. Quite a unique film, and I hope that listeners enjoyed this week's or this month's rather episode of Themes and Memes. Here we do an episode of this once a month. We're thinking about we might have more than one this month, actually. What do you think, Adam? It might be possible here.
Well, there's so many films. There's so many films coming out right now, which are just amazingly relevant and interesting and significant in terms of themes and memes. And it's just one after the other. Plus, we've got these older films which need to be paid, their dues as well. So we've kind of we're trying to sort of do the balancing act of looking at historical films in terms of the new and the old. So it's kind of I think we're going to end up doing more than one a month at this rate.
Yeah, so you can at least expect us to publish one of these podcasts every month. You can find it at my Transresistor radio feed at ageoftransitions.com for now. Expect more from us in the future. We're definitely going to continue doing these movie reviews. We're hopefully going to branch out and do a bit more. We'll see. But for now, keep listening. And I don't know. Do you have anything else to add to that, Adam?
No. I think it was an interesting discussion, and I enjoyed the film. I think it's worth watching for anybody who hasn't seen it. Definitely check it out, because I think especially after or before listening to this interview, I think I don't know. I think a lot of people will come away with perhaps a better understanding, and maybe a deeper or more profound understanding of how these fraternal orders work, and how the psychology of cults work, and all those types of things that we've covered tonight. So yeah, it's been a fun talk, and as you said before, we've got plenty more ideas and plenty more stuff lined up for the future. So stay tuned.
Yep. Great to talk to you as always, Adam. We'll see you later.
Not a problem. Take care. Bye-bye.
Today's episode of Themes and Memes was recorded on the 19th of July, 2014.
Bell.